Hey guys, this is Kerry. I wanted to introduce our first JavaScript project that has a graphical user interface. So maybe you've seen these things before, soundboards. So this morning I made the soundboard and it's got a bunch of images. And when you click them, it's going to play a sound. However, you can't hear a sound because I have my headphones in and I need to do that for the recording. So I cannot preview the sound part of this. But we're going to be taking a couple of days to do this. And one of the intentions around this is not just to teach you guys how to use JavaScript to make it so that it interacts with the user and plays sounds when we click it, but also because some of the feedback a lot of the feedback that I got was that people wanted to build more complex looking websites with more intricate layouts. And I think this is like a nice step in that direction as well. So we're going to also focus on the layouts. So today we're going to be building this graphical user interface, and then we're going to be adding the JavaScript and sounds next class. So in order to build this, we're going to go over to Rapple.it, and we're going to click on a new Rapple. We're going to always use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript probably in this class. And the thing that we're going to be building now, I guess I'm going to call it Soundboard Code Along, because I already have a soundboard here. All right, so as you look at this web page, hopefully there's a couple of things that start to come clear. I'm going to leave the script tag because we're going to eventually want to put JavaScript. And we actually have to write all of our HTML code above that JavaScript tag. So one of the things that may be clear here is this is a format that we've used many times before. We've got a main div here, and we're going to give that div a class. We're going to give that div a class of content. Now, if you think about the things inside of the div, we've got it's a bit tricky here. Oh man, I'm going to spend the whole video resizing this. Okay, we've got a couple of things inside of the div that you may recognize here. We've got in H1, the main title, Soundboard. So soundboard. And then I've got a program on my computer to make the emojis come up when I press colon here and start typing. But there's a way you can access the emoji keyboard on a Mac and then just forget it. So let me show you, if you have a Mac, how you get it. So Command Control Space, I think is it. So let's see if that works. Command Control Space. Yeah, okay, cool. That brings up the emoji keyboard, and then you can use any of these emojis. All right, so that's H1. Next, we have a project by Kerry. That's probably going to be in H2. Next up, we've got a collection of images, 6 in total. So I'm just going to create, just by pressing image and then tab, it will auto-generate 1. And I think actually it's going to be tricky to find 6 good images right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find one image that I like and then just copy and paste it a bunch. So to find an image that we like, maybe I'm just going to search for funk, because I think that would be like a cool thing to have in my soundboard. Now you're going to get a variety of cool images. I think these are really cool. But we're going to want all of our images to be squares so that they fit well here. We're not too worried about the actual size, but to make sure that they're squares, you go to Tools, not Tools, Settings, Advanced Search. And then for the aspect ratio of it, you can make it a square. And this way we only get square images in our search result. So find one of these that we think is cool. There's so many to choose from. Let's see, which one speaks to me? I think this one's pretty cool, so I'm gonna go with that one. I copy the image address here, and let's see, I'll put that as the source. So testing it out, awesome, it looks good. All right, your image might actually be really large when you do that, but don't worry, we can resize it. So this is going to be a placeholder image that I may replace with individual images when I find my correct sounds that I really want to keep. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this image 6 times for now, and then at the end we can worry about the details of which images are going where. So let's just see. I'm going to space it out actually in this code so I have an extra enter in between them. I'm leaving the alts blank because I'll likely change the image. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's just see if I got 6 there. It's hard to code along with this and see it all happening there, so I'm just going to pop it open. Okay, cool, 6 images. And it's hard to imagine that this website's going to become this, but let's see what the next steps are. Okay. Is that everything we have inside of there? I think that is actually. So it feels like the rest of this web page now for the rest of the day is just CSS styling. So let's just see. Okay, I gave the div a class of content. All right, so there's a couple of things that we are going to do here. Let's select the content div. Let's make the width of that div, I think I made mine 600 pixels. Now it's not going to look super good over here. Actually, it's hard to even see it. I'm just going to give it a temporary background of red. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Cool. All right, cool. So that's our div. Actually, I'm thinking that I didn't really do this. I know I did something else, but this is okay for now. Okay, cool. That's our div. Our images, we're going to start to give a style to. Let's see. Let's make their height 200 pixels. When we do that to our images, it's going to automatically resize the widths as well because these are square images. Both will be 200 automatically. Now, one of the main pieces of our layout here is actually this. We've got 4 rows that we're going to be creating a grid in order to display this. Now, you might look at this and you might say, okay, well, it really only looks like there's 2 rows of images. But the way we're going to code this in is we're going to imagine that this whole thing is actually a grid. So let's see. I'm actually going to delete this width. I'm sorry. I lied about that. That was the thing that I was thinking before. I know I did it a different way. What we're going to do is, in order to display this as a grid, we're going to be using a really cool feature of CSS, which is called CSS Grid, which allows us to make complex web layouts like this. And I use this feature pretty much on every site that I build. And I'm going to in particular use something called Inline Grid. An inline grid should actually resize the div so that it exactly fits the contents. Cool. So it's actually going to resize it automatically so that all of our grid is a single column. But if we look at the grid that we set up here, it has a different configuration. So in order to configure our grid, we're going to type in a couple of things. We need to set up the columns and the rows. So perhaps the rows are easiest. And I just type GTR here, and it automatically fills in something called grid template rows. So we're setting up a template for the rows here. If we think about the rows, it looks like I've got 1 row on top, this row, and then these rows here. Now these rows, the first row with the H1 is going to be 50 pixels. The second row I also made 50 pixels. And then these 2 rows here, I made them 200 pixels each. Okay. Let's do grid template columns. So now to set up the columns, instead of having just, and I know it looks like I have more than four rows right now. I should only have 4 rows. The reason why is I also have to configure the columns. The way this is set up is even though it looks like these columns just go here, these columns actually go all the way up. And then I basically tell it that this H1 should take up not just 1 column, but it should span all 3 columns on top. So the whole first row, all 3 columns. But we're going to need 3 columns. Since the images are 200 pixels, I want the columns to be 200 pixels as well. So 4 rows, 3 columns. All right, and we start to get something that looks pretty gross. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to basically put all of the stuff in the right columns. But unfortunately, it's not really doing that very well because it puts Soundboard over here in this one little corner, and we really want Soundboard to take up this whole top row. We want a project by Carrie to take up this whole top row, and then the 6 images here, here, and here. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna add that in now. So in order to assign the areas in the grid, we create a little image layout, basically, of a little text version of the grid down here. And so this is probably the most confusing step. Because we have 4 rows, I'm going to be setting up 4 strings. There's no commas, there's just enters in between them, and they're just using quotes here. Now I want the whole top row to be one area, and I want that area to have my title. This top row right here is this 50 pixel row. It automatically gets 3 columns we can see here. To make them all the same, I'm just gonna, in my text model of the grid, I'm gonna call this title, and I'm gonna say that the title should take up all 3 boxes. So the title's gonna take up 1, 2, 3, all 3 boxes on top. I'm gonna say that the subtitle should take up all 3 boxes here. And then here, there's gonna be 6 boxes, 3 in this row, 3 more in this row from the columns. And I'm going to allow image 1 to be the first box, image 2 to be the next, image 3 to be the next, image 4 to be the next, image 5 to be the next, and image 6 to be the next. And then when I press replay or reload, nothing happens. So the last step of making it happen is I need to say, okay, I want my H1 to take up this entire grid area, the whole title grid area. So to H1, I'm going to assign it grid area title. And now when we load it, the H1 does take up the entire title. I also would like H2 to take up the whole second row. So H2 is going to be assigned the grid area sub right here, which is that whole second row. Cool. Things are coming along nicely. And the images, actually, I don't have to reposition those. Those have automatically configured themselves to be in their proper spots. There were 6 images left. And with 3 columns in these 2 rows, there were 6 spots, so it automatically assigned them. All right, I do want my H1 to have a text-align center. I do want my H2 to have a text-align center. Cool. Now, you can see that these images are actually like just butting up against each other here. And if you look at the example, there's a little gap here. The last part of building this grid is I'd like to add in something called a grid gap. And the grid gap is going to be 10 pixels. And what that will do is it'll put a little bit of space in between these images. Now it's hard to see that with the background that I chose, so let me switch over to a different background color so that's easier to see. Now we can see that we've got the grid gap between the images. One thing that I always am cognizant of when I'm building a grid is I like the spacing for the grid gap to be the same as the spacing for the distance between the border of the element and the elements inside. We've learned that this property, which is the distance between the border of the element and the elements inside, is called padding. So to this content div, we're going to add some space over here on the side as well. So let's add padding 10 pixels. All right, so this is actually starting to look pretty nice here. And I think the rest of today's project is going to be mostly finding CSS effects that I like. So there were a couple of things that I did here that I thought were cool. One was I changed the font. So just a quick review of how you do that, because it's been a long time since we've done it. We can go over here and we search for Google Fonts. We click on Google Fonts. And I used Goldman from the homepage, but there's a lot of great fonts on here that you can sort of peruse through and find the one that fits. I'm going to go with Goldman again. They've updated this a little bit, I think. I liked the regular one better than the bold one, so I selected this style. And actually it was really cool. Automatically on the side, those informations that I needed came up. So I'm going to copy this link to link in this external file which contains the font. This looks like HTML, so this needs to go in my HTML code. And actually, I'm going to load the font before I load the CSS. So I'm just going to put it before the CSS link here. All right, and then in order to set the font, we use the second line, the CSS line, to set the font. Now I want to set the font for the whole web page. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create a select the body and add this font. And now when we run it, everything on the body has been given that font. So it's starting to match up here. Okay, let's see. All right, while we're talking about the body, it looks like I've done a background image for the whole page. So the background that I did is actually two parts here. The first part is that I created a linear gradient which changes from one color to another color. So the simple version of that is linear gradient, and then I actually made it a little bit see-through. So let me just go and copy out actually what my linear gradients were from this one. Cheat sheet over here. Okay, so it's this color, and I'll explain kind of what this color does. So let me go back to this so we're not looking at that code. RGBA 255.000.0.8 is basically a red because we have 255 in the R part, 0 in the green part, 0 in the B part. These letters each correspond to one of these numbers. And then for A, I chose 0.8, so it's basically 80% opaque. So that's why it's a little bit translucent looking in my image over here. And then the next one is, let's see, I'm going to copy and paste this RGBA here. I think I have to put a comma in this. But instead of being red, we want this one to be blue, so I'm going to turn the R to 0, keep the G as 0, and make the B 255. And I also, sorry, for linear gradient here, I also need to make sure that the linear gradient has a direction. So I think 180 degrees was the direction that I chose. Why isn't this working? Oh, you know why it's not working? Sorry about that. I forgot to put my parenthesis there. So, all right. Now we've got that. All right, this is starting to look good. I'd like that gradient to take up, 180 was the wrong number. It looks like it's a 90-degree gradient because we want it to go from left to right. Cool, awesome. And I'd like that gradient just to take up the entire page, which it seems to do automatically. All right. Lastly, what we're going to do, not lastly, I don't know why I'm saying lastly. I've got a while left of styling, it looks like. I need to make sure that this is centered. So actually I had a hard time centering this div. So I used a short trick. I want to center the content div. So what I did is I actually put it inside of another div, and I gave this div a class of main. So I put the opening tag here, and then I put the closing tag for main around the entire div. And the reason why I did that is now I can easily center content by just doing select the thing with the class of main and make everything inside of it have a text align property of center. So now when we run it, it centers the div. Also gave us a little bit more room on top, and room outside of an element is called the margin. So I added some margin on top of my content div. So I went down to the content, margin, top, because I only want to put this on the top, and I don't remember what number I did, maybe something like 100 pixels. Cool, that looks pretty close. All right. I think I used actually a different height for my images, but I think you can figure that out. All right, so let's see. What else do I need to show you in order to make this cool? All right, the background blue here for the content, I actually changed that to a color that was not blue. Now, one thing I've learned with styling is that using like solid pure black or solid pure white is often really jarring. So what I did was I used a light shade of gray here. So if you want, you can type in black, and then I can never get this to come up, but if you want, you can do that, and then you can change it to like a shade of gray over here, maybe 19, 19, 19, and that's going to look better. And then you can actually just change these numbers so that they all match. So I'd like mine to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to try 25 instead of 19. As long as they all match, it will be gray. And that looks pretty decent. Also, the content color has a different color for this. So to change the text color of the content, maybe something like light green would be a good starting point. I know I changed that a little bit, but now we've got that. Cool. Next up, we want to put a border radius on this because I see a subtle little radius there. So 5 pixels. All right, that looks pretty similar. It does look like there's a little box shadow around this, kind of giving it a 3D quality that makes it stand out kind of gently from the background. So I'm going to add in my classic box shadow here. So box shadow, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, or 10 pixels. And then I'm going to use that similar notation, RGBA, to give myself a little bit of a 0 red, 0 green, 0 black, or 0 blue. So this is going to be black because it has 0 of all the colors. And then a little bit, only 30% opaque, which means it's very translucent. And that shadow is a subtle effect, very subtle. But subtlety is kind of the name of the game with creating something that's actually very pretty to me, at least, or it looks like a modern website. All right, so this is coming out pretty nice. There's just a couple more things here. All of my images, I made them so that the colors were strange. The way that I did that was actually going back to one of the advanced CSS style lessons. I said to take the images and apply an image filter to them. And if you're curious about this, you can go back to that video, but the filter I used was an invert filter, and I inverted all of the images 100% from their colors. So I'm going to do that now, and now I've got this crazy cool inverted image. But you'll notice that as I hovered over them, they return to their normal colors. So to create that effect, I did image with the hover selector. And I said, okay, when I'm hovering over it, invert them 0%, which will make them go back to their normal color configuration. All right, so here we go. When we hover over them, they go back to the normal. But if you see here, they flip immediately, which is cool, and you can keep that if you like that. But I actually kind of like this where it's like a gradual flip. There's like a transition. So in order to get the transition there, what I did was I added to the image, whenever you're transitioning a style from one style to another, take 1 second to do it for all of them. So for any transition, it will take 1 second to do it now. And now what you see is it does that, which I think is a much nicer, more modern effect. You can also see that I've made the cursor a little pointer here, so that it looks like everything is clickable, which is something that we want. So let's make it clickable. All right, cool. So now it looks like everything is clickable because it has the little white pointer finger that will allow us to click things. All right, I'm starting to wonder if this is enough to complete it. I think that is kind of everything. Oh, there's one more thing. The background here, if you see, I have the gradient, but I've also got this like texture background. And this is a pretty cool trick to use. So there's a website that I'll link you to called Hero Backgrounds or Hero Patterns, heropatterns.com. And you can go through this and you can find any background that you like. So you may have seen topography on a website that I've built before. I really like it. Let's see. I'm going to go with glamorous this time. Change it up from bubbles, which I think I used last time. So to use glamorous, I click that and it gives me the code here. The part of this code that I want is basically from URL on. So I'm going to grab from URL to the semicolon. Let's see, it actually looks like it gave me the whole thing. That's okay as well. So it doesn't want to give me the part that I want. In order to add this textured background on top of the gradient, what I do is I go here and I just paste in everything. And yeah, it gave me the whole thing. So I don't want this background color because that's what it gave me. And I don't want to use the background image property because that will overwrite my background. So to create two different backgrounds that are layered on top of each other, I'm going to delete the semicolon that ends this background. I'm going to put a comma there so that I can add a second background. And then I'm going to delete background image here. And now what it says to me is take the background, make it a linear gradient, red to blue, looks good, but then also have this URL, which is this file from that website. So now this should work, and we've got nice little subtle diamonds going on in the background, which I think is kind of a cool effect. All right, so I think there's a lot in this video. Let's see. Yeah, I think there's a lot in this video, and there's some more things that I did that I think changed it up a little bit more over here. But I think this is a good start. And of course, you want to use your own colors. You want to make your own style choices, use different patterns, use different images. When you reach this point, what you can do is to make it look more complete. And you may need to change this next class as the caveat. To make it look more complete, you can go back to your image search, where I searched for funk here. And using the same window, you can find other images that hint at sounds for you. So maybe like space. And when I search in this window, it will automatically make it square. But if it doesn't, you can just go to Settings, Advanced Search, and set it to square again. And you can find the images for the rest of your slots here. All right, I think that's going to be good for now. All right, good luck with this, guys.